This is the Throstle Club with Norman Bartlam and Bob Downing. Hello and welcome to the January 2024 edition of the Throstle Club. It's the programme where we look back on the long and, of course, illustrious history of West Bromwich Albion with stories of particular interest to this month in days gone by. Now, usually I'm sitting alongside the well-known Sports Argus journo Bob Downing, but he's not too well at the moment, so we can't make it into the studio today, which of course is a big shame. However, you can't keep a good man down, and I spent some time with him yesterday recording a few contributions via Zoom, so regular listeners won't be deprived of their regular dose of Bob. That wouldn't be right at all, would it,
No.
Billy?
No,
That's
no.
the voice of Billy there from Black Country Radio, who's twiddling and fidgeting as usual on the controls and putting in his two penneth worth throughout the show, no doubt. Now, our studio guest today was a great servant of West Bromwich Albion, particularly in the mid-1990s, when he hit the winner for the Albion in a 2-1 win over the Wolves at Molineux. And it's none other than Albion's Welsh international, Paul Mardon. So, hello, Paul. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Right, now, no doubt we've got plenty to talk about on this edition of the Throstle Club. So there we are. Welcome then to the January 24 edition of the Throstle Club. And our special guest is Paul Mardon. So let's get cracking straight away and talking to the great defender. Spent about 7-8 years or so at the Albion under loads of different managers, and the great moments against Wolves. No doubt we'll end up talking about that, Paul. You've got a smile on your face already. You haven't even started talking about it.
I know, it's always lovely to reminisce over such a famous moment in the club's history and my history, I suppose, with the club. It followed on from that great goal with Darren Bradley early on in the season, live on TV, which I watched as a Birmingham City player, and was amazed at the game. I think it was a 3-2 win, wasn't it? And yeah. Kevin did his famous salute to the crowd. Anyway, I was obviously joined in the next few months after that, and it was a great game to be involved in the away leg, and as you said, I was lucky enough to get on the score sheet and get a famous winner.
Brilliant. So you'll always be remembered in the Black Country for that. So tell us a little bit about your background and stuff, how you got started in football.
Well, like a lot of kids, everybody loved playing football, and I certainly was one of those. I suppose I had a bit of pedigree in the family. My grandfather played for Bristol City, Notts County, Bournemouth in the 1930s. Unfortunately, his career was cut short a little bit. Well, not a little bit. It was cut short because of the war. So when that finished, he never really got back into playing. But then my father was John was a good prospect, and was on the Swindon books as a 16-year-old, but unfortunately didn't break through. He had a couple of injuries, and timing wasn't quite right for him. So he went into play non-league football and was manager, and I can remember kicking a ball as early as I could walk. So luckily enough, I had a talent and progressed through to manage to have a half-decent career as a pro.
Did you have a good school teacher that encouraged you a lot when you were a sort of junior age?
Yeah, well, it was completely different back then in the, what would it be, the 70s, I suppose. I was born in 69, so the 70s and things. I didn't play competitive football till about 10 in school, whereas now academies are grabbing kids at 4 or 5 and not playing competitively, but having quite some serious coaching and things like that. But it was school teachers that were the first influence on you in school teams, but more often than not was your parents and the coaching from a father, and just go and play, really. The coaching and all the skills and the dribbling things were things that you did on your own and never really did in a collective environment like an academy or anything like that. But somehow you get through it, and you progress to school teams, representative teams. I played for Bristol Boys. I was captain of Bristol Boys at 11, which again was one of the first great honours. And then being a Bristol boy, you're either a Bristol City fan or a Bristol Rovers. And I lived in the south of Bristol and was a Bristol City fan, and was linked to their books quite early on, from about 11 or 12. Didn't sign schoolboy forms, but played in a lot of their youth team sides up until 16, when I signed an apprenticeship there. YTS as it was then.
Yeah, so that's fantastic, really. But being a good local lad, well, it probably meant a lot to you to be playing for your home team, didn't it?
Well, definitely. Yeah, I was a bit of a home bird as well, homeboy. I didn't want to go and stay away. There was lads of there's probably about 10 or 11 players that could and should have made it, but there's about 3 or 4 that actually did at the crop that I was around. And those lads that went to Southampton, Man United. I went to both those clubs. It's probably 12, 13 for school holidays and things, but it's something I didn't really like. I like to be at home, and I like that those home comforts. So I sort of focused on playing for Bristol City, and I did that, and that was my first thing that I wanted to achieve, was play for your hometown club, and I did that, and and broke into the side at 18, and that was a great honour.
What was it like? Were you all your family and the likes there making your first team debut? It must have been fantastic.
Yeah, it was. It all came quite quickly. I was a second-year apprentice, so I think it was this month. It was January, so I think there was a couple of injuries in the first team, and I was pulled in by Terry Cooper to travel up to Preston away. From Bristol City, a hell of a journey, but and it was on the AstroTurf pitch. So I don't think I knew if I was playing or not then. So I don't think my parents got up there. Maybe they did. I can't remember seeing them after the game. But I played well enough. I think we lost actually 2-1 or 1-0, but obviously I had a decent debut, and I held my place for the home game against Notts County, and that's where I remember it, playing in front of your home crowd, and my parents were definitely there, and it was a great game, and really sticks in my memory.
Brilliant. Now we'll talk a bit more about your career, obviously with the Albion a little bit later in the programme. So is it Swindon, Billy?
Yeah. How old's your dad?
Dad's 75, so
might have been there same time as me.
Could you explain to folks, because you were at Swindon yourself?
Yeah. I left. Did my GCEs at grammar school, and I'd been on the Wolves books for same as you since I was a school kid, and then came home one day just after we'd done our exams, and there were 2 blokes. John Trollope's dad was there, and what was his name? Danny Williams was the manager, and they were sat in the kitchen and coming with me football and my boots and everything. I've been playing at Smerry Park, and my dad says, "These blokes want to sign you for Swindon Town," and I went, "Did they?" And I said, yeah, they've been watching you for the last 2 years, unbeknownst to me. So I signed and went down to Swindon. A bit like your dad, 3 years, 3.5 years was great. Then they changed managers. Shall I name him? And there was a guy called Fred Ford came, who was like a massive London bully. And by that time, I'd got a bit savvy to it, and I was sticking up for all the young kids, because he'd like effing blind on the training pitch and all that, and we just didn't get on. And in the end, he sort of blocked any progress, because he'd say, if you don't do this, I'll do this. And I went, no, you don't. And then it got to the point where we verbally agreed on a new contract, and when it was less when it was on paper, so I refused to sign it. And he said, "I'll ruin you, I'll do this," and I went, "Look, just give me my money, I'm going home," and that was it.
I wish I'd have spoken a bit more about this with Dad. I could have seen if it was the same era, because it sounds very similar.
I'd probably be there, what would it be, 52, 62, 66, probably 68 till about 71, 72. Yeah. So he might have just been coming.
Well, I was born in 69, and I think my dad was about 21 when he had me, I think. So, it would be 4 years, 65, 64, I would have thought.
Yeah, probably the same. Yeah, probably same thing.
Sounds a similar sort of situation where
Yeah.
manager might have changed. And I think my dad broke his wrist and had to have an operation, and they used a bit of bone from his hip, and it took a bit of while getting back playing again, and things all changed by the time he got back in. And
I can always remember saying to this bloke, and I mean he was a big bloke, this Fred Ford was, and I always remember saying, that's not what we shook hands on. And he went, I'm no so-and-so manager. And I said, look where I come from. If you shake on something, that's a done deal. That's not a done deal. What you've just written down there, I'm sending you to Bournemouth. I said, you ain't sending me anywhere. Just give me my money. I'll finish. And then I had to come home and tell my dad. And my dad just knew. And all he said was, did you stick up for yourself? And I went, well, of course I did. He said, well, that's it, son.
Good.
Whatever money I got in my pocket was about 700 quid payoff. He said, put that in the bank and go and get a job tomorrow. Which is what I had to do. Yeah, but it was great. I mean, it's life experience, probably like your dad. It was a great life experience, a learning experience.
It sounded like a big team for Swindon nowadays, isn't the club? But I wondered, because my dad sounded like he was one of the better players around, and he'd been to Arsenal
played
on trial.
All a bit,
and I thought, why did you sign for Swindon? And I think they were quite.
Well, they won the League Cup, I think, the second year I was there.
Don
Rogers and Stan Holland and people like that. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's great. It's a life experience, isn't it, really?
Right, they're all our yesterday Swindon.
This is supposed to be about the
Bristol
basics.
City and
just,
Swindon so far, West Country radio.
More West Country stuff coming up in a bit. Now, let's just change tack a bit now, because there's a big anniversary coming up, and I know you remember this, Billy. We were talking about it earlier. 60 years ago, this very month, there was a major incident involving the fire brigade and the Albion. It wasn't a fire, but it was a rescue, because what happened, Jimmy Hagan was at the Spring Road training ground on the canal down off Spon Lane, and he got this new car, and he managed to miscontrol it, shall we say, and he ended up going down 150 feet down into the canal and needing to be rescued. Now, Bob wasn't there at the time. He was a trainee reporter, but he remembers the story about what happened at that time.
I was only a cub reporter then. I was on the Midland Chronicle, and I remember we used to have reporters who every periodically during the day would ring up the police, the fire brigade, and the ambulance service to see if there'd been any incidents that we could report on or we should know about. And one of the lads was doing the calls, and he found up the fire brigade. And he said, hello, it's the Midland Chronicle. He said, anything happened in the last half an hour? And he said, oh, yeah, we have. He said, just fetch the Albion manager out the cut. Oh, what? And then we got a photographer down there and whatever. And then the news reporters. I mean, I was only a junior then, so it was the senior reporters who went down and got the started doing the story. But yeah, I mean, I think he was a lucky bloke, Norm. He was a lucky bloke.
So, there we are. I was miles away just thinking there about what I would possibly be thinking if I was there at the time. You don't know how you're going to react, do you? You're just spontaneous, I suppose. Yeah, very much so. Now, it certainly was a lucky bloke, and Graham Williams, as the Albion captain, of course, from '68, was around at the time as a youngster, and these are his recollections of what happened alongside those of Mickey Fudge. Manager Jimmy Hagan got into his car, and it shot straight through the fence onto the canal bank, where it careered downwards, somersaulting as it did so, ending up in the canal. The first man on the scene was West Bromwich Albion man Graham Williams.
I was first down. I've come out of training and I'm just going to get in my car, and he's got the new Cresta automatic choke, which he didn't know how to control or anything. So he's now got a reverse, but he put his foot on the accelerator and it shot over the top.
He slipped off the brake.
He's straight over the top, and he's rolled over and over.
He was lucky the car went face up, like upright.
Wheels in. No, it slipped and went wheels in.
Yeah, And he was lucky because otherwise he could
It
have
comes through
drowned.
the windscreen.
And all his paperwork was floating on the canal at Spring Road.
I've run down, and he's just getting out, and he's lying on the bonnet.
And his neck in it.
He's done his bonnet. So we've got sent for the medical. So he's had to lie there first of all because we couldn't get him up. So we've got a stretcher from Spring Road. We've gone down, and the medical men have come down and said, "How are we going to get him? We can't carry him up there." So we've decided we'll all go aside and lift him and carry him above our heads. And he said, "This is when Mickey's out." He said, "The trouble with you lads, you're not bloody fit."
Yeah. And he shouted out to us, he says, "Tell Alec Jackson and Mickey Fudge to drop her in the reserves tomorrow." And I can remember Alec turning around and said, "Give me a fiver each, lads, I'll go down and I'll drown him." He said, Alec Jackson.
He said, "You're not fit." And
Used to run every day, didn't we, for 10 or 12
nobody said a word, they've just gone and just looked at each other. Who's going to throw him back in?
Yeah, I can remember.
Who's going to throw him back
Alec
in?
Jackson.
Yeah, some great memories there, and lucky bloke indeed, as we were saying earlier. Now, this programme obviously is the January one, and we're recording it right at the beginning of January, just a day or two before the FA Cup third round. So you're either going to be cheering or you're going to be, oh no, at the mention of the FA Cup third round because of the big Aldershot game coming up. So let's talk about FA Cup memories. Bob and Laurie I've been talking to, and Paul, yourself, you signed for the Albion in November in 1993, and that was just after, luckily for you, after the Albion had been by Halifax Town in the first round of the FA Cup. I think it was the first time we played in the first round for donkey's years, and that was a real humiliating occasion, almost worse than the Woking defeat a couple of years earlier. But luckily for us fans, or some of us anyway, we escaped the country straight after Halifax, because we drove down from Halifax straight down to Gatwick Airport and flew away for the Anglo-Italian Cup game in Fiorentina.
Okay.
And so that brightened it up a little bit for us. And we're actually at the airport on the way back when I got the message to say that you'd signed for the Albion, and I always remember saying, we've signed Mardon from the Blues.
Is that a good response or a bad response?
It did get a good response, because at that time, of course, we were not very happy about the Halifax defeat. But what about yourself? Any good FA Cup memories?
To be fair, I never really had a very good run in any of the FA Cup tournaments from a young lad right up to the finish at West Brom, unfortunately. I had a run in the League Cup, but hit the semi-finals with Bristol City, but I don't think I got further third or fourth round, and unfortunately I think in my time at Albion it continued similar to the Woking. I don't think we had many runs at all, if any.
No, not during
Very
your time anyway.
It's very disappointing because as a player you love to the excitement, you get the buzz of the ground as well, and you always got the opportunity of getting a big club at the ground and the excitement that brings. But no, unfortunately, it never happened too many times in my career.
Oh, well, so here's Bob anyway, and talking with Laurie Rampling as well. Now, Laurie has helped Stuart Curtis, who does the Albion News, to produce a special edition of the Albion News for the FA Cup, looking back on the history of Albion in the FA Cup. And yesterday I had the pleasure of talking with Laurie and Bob about their FA Cup memories.
There's no better day in football for me. There's two. The start of the new season and the third round of the FA Cup.
That's right. Absolutely spot on to me, Bob.
That's when it all gets going. That's when you can start thinking of other things. But
yeah, I mean, I can remember when I was a kid, Bob. I used to run home from school at dinner time on the Monday. To get round the radio and listen to the draw.
Yeah.
It was magical. It was magical. It was the third round of the FA Cup. Wow. I'll
tell you something, Laurie. When I was working on the Express and Star, we had, third round of the FA Cup. Jeff Wright was down there with, because he was the photographer for the Express and Star. Jeff Wright was down there. He'd take a little portable radio down with him. We get all the players surrounded on the car park, listening to the radio.
Yeah.
And you could get their reaction, sort of team number 38, West Bromwich Albion, against, number 6 Manchester United, and you could get the reaction straight away.
Remember, 38. We were 42 at one stage, weren't we?
Oh, everybody used to work out if they did it alphabetical order.
Nah, yeah. But listen, we're never ever going to get those days back, and I appreciate that, and I know there's never ever going to be. But I just find it an absolute cardinal sin the way the big clubs have actually just run the FA Cup down to a competition that they regard as a hindrance rather than an asset to the season. Listen, they'll love getting to Wembley. They won't moan and groan then about it, but to diminish the FA Cup and what it meant now by no replays and penalty shootouts now without listen, mate.
One of the funniest things for me, Laurie, was a couple of years ago, a certain Midlands manager, I won't say who it was, whose club were in trouble of being relegated, right?
Yeah.
Picked a substandard side for the third round of the FA Cup, and he was criticised. And he said, I'm not interested in the FA Cup. I'm interested in survival. Towards the end of the season, when they got about 3 or 4 games left, this bloke actually came out and said, every game from now is a cup final.
Oh, dear me. There's a contradiction in terms, isn't there? Yeah. So, I love the cup. Always will do. I just like to see the best side we can put out, get out there, do the job. I remember Tony Pulis against Gateshead when I spoke to him before the game, he was certainly leading up to the game. He put the team out against Gateshead to win the game, and we won 7-0, and that's all you can ask.
Yeah.
Berahino was on fire that day.
And he scored 4, I think, didn't he, that day?
4 goals, yeah. I think that's probably the last hat trick scored in the FA Cup by us.
Okay.
There's no messing around then.
You've done lots of research, haven't you, Laurie, into Albion in the FA Cup, which lots of...
It's a joint liaison between myself and Stuart Curtis at Curtis Sport. We decided that we wanted a special cup for the third round of the FA Cup, and it is with a very, very special cover and complete research right away back to the first time we played in the FA Cup against all non-league sides after the league was formed in 1888. Because before that, of course, we were all non-league. And it's quite a fascinating list, really.
Yeah.
It includes teams like Tottenham Hotspur, who are in the Southern League, West Ham, who are in the Southern League, Norwich City, who are in the Southern League. It's quite a comprehensive list, and not just the little teams, can we still call them little teams, but sides like Woking, Marlow, and Wickham, who were non-league at the time. So it is a comprehensive list, yeah.
Well, the elephant in the room is always Woking, isn't it? You've mentioned Woking anyway, so that's got to be our worst ever disaster, hasn't it, against the non-league team?
Yeah, well, it has, and it still hurts. Halifax as well.
Yeah.
We had 2 horrendous seasons of FA Cup dismissals against sides that we should have just blown away in the breeze. And they still, it's like a knife in the heart, Norman. To be honest, it still hurts to this day. Listen, pal, I'm still hurting about losing to Lincoln City 3-1 in 1960. Was it 61? Whatever. When Andy Graver, I think, got a hat trick, and I've hated him ever since. So it still does. It still does hurt. Yeah, Bob was probably reporting at that time. I don't know. But,
what year was that?
Yeah,
what was that? What year was that, Laurie?
He was being facetious. It was 1961.
The FA Cup is and always will be the Premier Trophy in my mind. I know getting into the Premier League is important. That I'm not saying it isn't, But if you're telling me that we can't give the FA Cup a go, give the fans something to cling on to. A trip. I know we're probably not going to get to Wembley, but just the thought of seeing the Twin Towers. I know we won't see them anymore, but seeing that whatever it is that goes over the top of it now, it's still getting to Wembley. I remember 2008 getting to Wembley in the semi-final, and we should have got to the final that year.
Yeah,
and that still hurts to a certain degree. So to me, I cut my teeth in 1954. That's where I came in, as far as West Brom were concerned, watching us beat Preston in 54. So that, to me, is dear to my heart. That's the cup, you see, the magic of the cup. Listen, we've been talking now for the last 20 minutes about the greatest competition in the world. And still is in the back of my mind, although to many, of course, it isn't. But, I don't know how you change people's attitudes and psyche about it at all, but it'll always be magical for me, and as it is for you, Bob.
Yeah, magical FA Cup memories there from Bob Downing and Laurie Rampling. Now, let's move on a little bit, and we're going back in time now into the 1960s, the early 1960s, and we've been grumbling about the weather of late, mainly because it's been so wet, not particularly snowy, just wet. But in the bad winter back in 1963, it really was wet and snowy. And do you remember much about that, Billy?
No, I'm too old to remember 1963 now. Blimey.
Yeah, that somebody who's been doing loads of research on it is one of our regular contributors, Simon Wright, and he remembers what it was like from stories that he's been told about Albion playing at Plymouth in 1963, when before motorway days, when the coach with the supporters had to be dug out of the snow a couple of times on the way down to Plymouth, and this is what he had to say.
Plymouth Argyle FA Cup third round 1963. I've researched this, and sadly there's probably very few people still around today who were actually at that game, so I'm sort of talking on behalf of them. Let me paint a picture for the younger generation. The winter of 63 was one of the worst winters ever, and there were 5, 6, 7 foot piles of snow everywhere. People couldn't get to work. Coal couldn't be delivered, so people couldn't get heating, and that was the background. For weeks on end, the Football League programme was called off. I remember Albion did call people and try and clear the pitch, but then they realised they got 10 foot of snow. Where did they put it? So they gave up in the end. So weeks and weeks went by. But FA Cup third round come round, and Plymouth being obviously very south, the weather was slightly better. It was still horrendous, but not quite as bad as the rest of the country. And while virtually every FA Cup third round game was called off, Plymouth against Albion still had a chance of going on. For the keen Albion supporters, that was a tricky one, because on Thursday all the trains were cancelled going south, and most people, who really struggled to get to the end of their drive or the end of their street, had no real serious plans about going to Plymouth in those pre-motorway days. But there was a few gallant souls who did, and ultimately I think the only people who probably went were two very determined coach loads of supporters who left by coach from Albury at midnight. Now you immediately think, what earth at midnight? And you can think about these 1960s coaches. Of course, they had basically no safety aids of such. They probably had more determined drivers who may have been driving during the war and therefore were used to adverse conditions. I think there were smaller coaches. There were maybe sort of 30, 35 seaters, and the boot space was filled with spades and shovels. They had no real idea what they were going to get into. They weren't at all certain they could actually get there, and of course it was the middle of the night. So, they bravely set off. Again, no motorways, so, it was the A roads, complete white out in many, many areas, but they soldiered on, and then the coach come off the road. For certain groups of people, they'd probably say, that's it, I don't know, can't be doing with this, call the AA, but of course you couldn't do that then. They just broke out the spades and the shovels from the boot and dug that coach back on the road again. And that, a few miles later, that happened again. Middle of the night, can't really see what they're doing, probably no easy way getting illuminations, but they were one determined bunch. They got that coach back on the road again, and off they set, trying to snatch as much sleep as they could. They got to Plymouth, I think it's about 9 o'clock in the morning, so it's only sort of 9 hours travel right through the night, being woken up trying to keep the coach on the road, only to find out when they got there that the game was in serious doubt, which probably not what you want to hear after an experience like that. So they were told to go away, amuse themselves as best they could in a very, very frozen Plymouth Hoe area, while a Plymouth ground crew and volunteers did their best to get the game on. Now that's probably a story in itself. They called in tractors, and I think there was 3 pitch inspections before they finally agreed it could go ahead, by which time, the Albion supporters probably got icicles on their nose and, stuff dripping out of their ears because they were that cold. But thankfully they had a game. Plymouth, I believe, were 3rd division side at the time. They weren't terribly good. The pitch obviously was a leveller, I think that's the modern phrase, and once Albion managed to adjust to it, they were comfortable winners. They won 5-1, so that was a bit of kudos for the people who got there, but of course, having got there, then I had to get back again. Another however many 8-9 hours of coach travel, and one very, very exhausted driver, I would imagine. But the hardy breed in the 1960s. I mean, I suppose the one plus point that people could say, I don't think Albion played another game for about 6 weeks afterwards. So those who were there could boast, I've seen Albion score this year. Nobody else could. You'd like to say that Albion went all the way to Wembley after a match like that, but sadly they went out, I think, in a replay after the next round. So it was largely in vain, but an experience to talk about for people who were there.
It was an I was there moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I was there moments, and that's what football's all about, isn't it? Good experiences and things that you certainly remember. Now, Paul, something that you certainly remember was the big chant from the Albion fans of Captain Scarlet, because you suddenly became a Welshman, didn't you? So, come on, tell us about that, because even though you were born in Bristol, you managed to get 1 cap for Wales. Yeah. And Bobby Gould was the Welsh manager at the time, which obviously helped on that, didn't it?
Yeah, that was basically... I always knew I had Welsh blood through my grandfather, who was born in Cardiff. But up until I was 26, I think, when I played for Wales, the Welsh FA weren't using the FIFA ruling where you could go to grandparents to allow a player to play for the national team. So I think Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland had done exactly that with Jackie Charlton and had successes, and with Bobby Gould coming in as manager, he wanted to have a bigger pool of players, and fortunately I had an opportunity of playing for Wales, and it came out of the blue, and it came out of a five-a-side. It's in the training at West Brom. It's quite amazing, really. Two-week turnaround. We basically were playing a five-a-side in after training, or at the end of training, and it was English against everyone else. So the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish, any other nationalities that were in the squad, and there was no. There wasn't enough non-English players to make the other team up. I just said to Alan Buckley, "I've got Welsh blood. I'll play for the non-English." So that's what happened. And he said, "I didn't know you had Welsh blood. How did that come about?" And he said, "Well, my grandfather," he said, "I'll have you in that Welsh team before you know it." And I thought it was just a throwaway comment. But within 2 weeks, literally it was within 2 weeks, I think I had a letter from the Welsh FA saying, "Please join us to be part of the training squad. I wasn't in the official 15 or 16, but come down and train with the Welsh squad for the build-up to the Euro 96 qualifiers against West Germany at Cardiff Arms Park. So you can imagine the excitement to have that call-up. So I went down on the Saturday. I can't remember who we played for Albion, but went down after the game to Cardiff, joined at the hotel. All these players started turning up, and I realised quite quickly a couple have got injured on the Saturday. Training on the Sunday, a few players went back home with colds or were ill, and the squad was getting smaller and smaller. So after the training on Sunday, I got a sense that I could be in this squad here. I could be in
the team.
Yeah. So and that's how it worked out. I ended up getting on the bench against Germany and making my debut in the second half. So it was an amazing couple of weeks turnaround for me to be a Welsh international, and it was a lovely moment because my grandfather, who I spoke to about, who played for. Who had the Welsh blood and played professional football as well. He passed away when I was 11, so he never saw me progress to be a pro. But my grandmother was still alive, and we managed to organise that to my parents and my grandmother there when I made my debut for Wales. So a very, very proud moment for the family and myself. But unfortunately, I didn't get too many other caps. I was involved in quite a few squads. I was sub a couple of times against Italy. We don't get a cap. Got a B cap against Northern Ireland, I think. But yeah, you can't take it away from me. I've got a Welsh cap, and as I'm looking on a desk here, the picture of one of the Baggies magazines there with me with Paul Mardon, Captain Scarlet, which was the chant that went out when I came back. I was captain for Albion at the time, and it was Captain Mardon International to the Captain Scarlet.
What was it like when you were on the pitch when you first heard that? What did you think?
I remember, I said to you earlier, was it at Luton away? Because I can remember, I think that was the game after I came back from making my debut. And hearing that, and the biggest smile on my face. What are they singing? What are they singing? As long as it was positive, and then it was brilliant. And yeah, it stuck for a few years, and people still remember it now. A few caricatures of me with Captain Scarlet hats on and things. Right.
Yeah.
So
brilliant.
yeah, amazing time, and like something I never expected. I thought international football had passed me by, but to be in the squads, which had Ian Rush in, Ryan Giggs, Gary Speed, Neville Southall, all these
Dean
class
Saunders
players.
as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, so some class players, and I was honoured to represent the country. Yeah.
So you've got established people like Gary Speed and Ryan Giggs there. So how are they with you? Because they don't know much about you. They must be thinking, who's this bloke who's come in?
That's exactly what they must have been thinking. Yeah. No, I think I've said it a few times on interviews. I was I felt like I was a bit of a fan. I was like, imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? And obviously I had a right to be there. I was captain and playing well at West Brom, and you don't get called up if you're not playing decent football. But I remember being in the squad against Italy away, and I think we played on a Wednesday, so we flew over straight after the Saturday night, and we had a couple of days in Rome and around there. And I remember the announcement went out, we're going into Rome tonight, just have like a tourists really, and jumping into a taxi, and I'm looking right, Ian Rush is sat next to me, Mark Hughes is in the front, Ryan Giggs is walking across the foyer of the hotel, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? sat by the Trevi Fountain with walking through Rome with Ian Rush next to me like my mate, thinking, yeah, this is unreal. It's hard to put into words, but it did feel like a fan experience rather than a player.
Imagine, What about memorabilia? Obviously, you've got your members, but have you got your shirt, the programme, and
I didn't keep too many things from my time. I think my parents have got good scrapbooks and things, and but I did swap shirts after that German game, and I swapped with a player called Stefan Kuntz, which always brings a smile to my face. But like he probably didn't know who I was, and to be fair, I never followed international football too well, so I didn't know who he was either.
Yeah.
But he went, obviously Germany qualified for that Euro '96, and it was at Wembley, and Stefan Kuntz did score the goal against England. I don't know if it was a penalty or was it through open play, but he definitely scored, and I thought, I've got his shirt. so yeah, I've got that still, and I've got my Welsh shirt on the wall, and I say I've got a Welsh cap and a B cap as well. So yeah, lovely memories, and yeah, it's good to look back.
Did they keep in touch afterwards? I mean, when you didn't play for Wales anymore, did Rushy and Giggs keep in touch?
No, wasn't it?
I just wondered,
I don't think mobile phones. I don't know. Social media and everything else. It's so easy to keep in contact with people now, and you have to have your home phone number and things like that. Yeah. Maybe mobile phones were around, but it weren't as regular there. But no, I remember Gary Speed being a lovely, lovely guy.
Yeah, everybody talks about Gary Speed.
Yeah, he was really down to it. He was a superstar. He'd obviously been to big clubs. I'm not sure if he was captain at that stage of Wales, but he knew a few lads from West Brom as well, so it was a nice, easy conversation. Neil Parsley, I think, and a few others that were around that area, maybe grew up with him and played it. But I remember one of the nicest things was after the game. Obviously, I only played 25 minutes, and I changed the game. I went on, it was 0-0, and we lost 2-1. So I didn't change it in a positive way, but. Gary Speed came over in the hotel after the game, as we all went back to the hotel and met our families and everything else. And he made a point of coming over, shaking my hand and saying, congratulations, hope it's one of many. That all sticks in my mind, because he never needed to do that. Nobody else did it. But he took the time to come over and acknowledge that it was my first cap. That always sticks with me.
Fantastic stuff. Now, you're one of the many players, I suppose, over the years that have played for West Bromwich Albion and Birmingham City, aren't you? And we were talking on this programme recently with Dennis Clark. It's his birthday this month, actually, so happy birthday, Dennis. And he was transferred from the Albion to Huddersfield in January 1969, so that's a bit of an anniversary there, and he eventually went on to Birmingham City.
Well, what it was, I was 20. I was just brought into the first team. And what it was, he got Graham Williams, captain of Wales, at left back, and he got Dougie playing at right back, who was playing for Scotland. And I couldn't just get in the side, and I thought, well, I don't want to be in the reserves. And I thought, so I asked for a transfer after the semi-final of the FA Cup. And after the cup final, I think I played one more game against Southampton, rings a bell. And then all of a sudden he just comes and says, Huddersfield want to sign you. So I made my way to Huddersfield, Ian Greaves, and he talked me into signing for Huddersfield Town, which was quite good actually, because at the time there was Trevor Cherry, who played for England and Leeds United captain, Frank Worthington, who was playing for England, who was a great player. And it was a good move for me because we won the championship, second division championship at the time by quite a few points. So that was the reason I asked for a move. To better myself at the time.
Yeah, and then you ended up at the Blues as well after that, didn't you, for a while?
Well, yeah. Well, what it was, I'd snapped my tendon in my ankle, so I was out for nearly the season. And when I come back to get fit, we'd been relegated, and they sold all the best players off. So there was only me left. So I thought, well, I'll have to try and get back into the Premiership or whatever it is. So I asked for a move, and the first team that came in for me was Birmingham City. And they paid double the price of what West Brom sold me for. and I found out later I found out later that Birmingham wanted to sign me from West Brom, but they wouldn't sell me. I said, no, if you we can't have you being a success in Birmingham, so they sent me up north. Which I can understand.
Yeah.
I can understand.
It's amazing, really, isn't it, Dennis, that virtually your career went full circle because you were on the train, getting the train to go and sign for Birmingham. And
but I might have made it then, might I? I might have made it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So Who was at the Blues at the time? Anybody
Uh,
big?
yeah, I played with what's his name? Gary Sprake came with me from Leeds.
Oh,
Howard Kendall from Everton. We had Bob Latchford, Trevor Francis, Bob Hatton, Gordon Taylor, PFA chairman at the time.
oh yeah.
We had a really good side, but they couldn't gel like the Albion. See, the Albion we could gel. Youngsters, the young kids got on great with the elder players at the Albion. There's no click. Whereas the Blues, they never gelled. Don't know why. They never gelled. And they had a great side. In fact, I got to the semi-final of the FA Cup with Blues. And then the game before that, I played against Wolves at Molineux, and I got injured and finished my career. Otherwise, I could have another one to my belt.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been fantastic for the Blues as well. It's the biggest thing that they'd done for donkey's years to reach that semi-final.
They were a good side, actually. I mean, I talk to them quite a lot, and because I sometimes go to Blues, and they all say that they should have won the match. But I watched the match and I thought we were fantastic. And I think Bonus scored 2 goals that day, did he? That's Sonny Brown, sorry.
Not sure.
But anyway, Birmingham were a good side at the time, and West Brom were just that shade better.
And it was interesting that he's saying that the Albion didn't really want to sell him directly to Birmingham City. In case they did well, they didn't want to be seen to be supporting the local rivals. So
I think that changed during my period of my career, because I think we would just spoke about it. I think when I was at Albion, Peshkalido came from Birmingham, or played for Birmingham. Dave Smith, Paul Holmes, Alan Miller played for us. Graham Potter played for both. So maybe they didn't come directly. Some did definitely come directly across. And I must admit, I never thought of the rivalry too much when I came across. I suppose I played against West Brom the previous season when Bobby Gold was manager, and I remember what an atmosphere it was when I marked Don Goodman, and he was at his heights. I think did he move for $1 million to Sunderland that season? So I got him a good move there as well. But I had a
should have got commission for this.
I think, to be fair, that game got me in the Welsh squad, because I think Bobby Gold was manager, and I did have a good game against Don Goodman, and we won 1-0. So, but obviously it was rivalry there. But obviously, I played against Blues, against Villa, and it was Albion and Wolves. So I never saw it as a big controversy of me moving across the city at all, and I never felt it either. To be fair, I never felt any animosity towards me, and I got very well welcomed by everyone. And like I say, I don't know if we've spoke about it, but the winning goal against Wolves that season, and after a few months of joining, certainly any rivalry or any hesitation by the fans taking to me really got put to bed that game.
I just can't think why, but there you go. Yeah, you say you were playing with Graham Potter. So back in those days, was there any indication that he was really interested in management? Because he's still a long way off, I suppose, because he was still a young player.
No, he's a very thoughtful young lad, and he was into education. So even at 16, when he broke into Birmingham City, he wanted to do his A-levels, and he wanted to progress with education. And I think he continued when he was at West Brom, to be honest. I think he did some qualifications there. And obviously his first foray into football was through the education setup. I think he worked for university and before he went out to Sweden. But he's very thoughtful, very... he had an old head on his shoulders. He would hold it. I remember one time in the changing rooms, I think I was injured when Brian Little was there, so it was Andy Townsend was in the dressing room, and there was a politics debate going on, unusually, or something like that. And instead of just sitting back and listening, Graham, I remember, was quite forthright with some of his opinions and argued his point very well. So he was... you could see he had a bit of presence about him back then, but he's done amazingly well. And I must admit, I was really disappointed that it didn't work out for him at Chelsea, because the way he managed and treated players and spoke about players and spoke about the clubs as a whole as progressing all the way through from the bottom through to the first team was very refreshing, and it's a shame it didn't work out, but I'm sure he'll get his another opportunity and do well again.
Yeah. But, now, another player at that time, of course, was Paul Salido. Yeah, now, must have been a bit difficult for him because he was having, shall we say, a relationship at that time, wasn't he, with Karen Brady, who was the managing director, I think, down at the Blues.
Yeah, we were at Blues together, me and Pesh, and he obviously had a relationship with Karen, but that's something I do. It does bring a smile to my face because I was probably one of his best mates at the time before he met Karen, and obviously I went to the wedding and when they got married, obviously, and but in the early stages of that relationship, I never knew what was going on, and I was his best mate. The first time I knew was when the News of the World reported it, unbelievably. But as I found out that there were signs that I didn't pick up on through forums and like during the week, you'd be requested to go to supporters club dues, and Pesh was quite often the lad I used to go with because we were two young lads. Both living away from home at the time. I hadn't bought a house at that stage, and then at the end of that sort of period, I used to get a call from Karen's secretary. There's no need for you to go tonight, Paul. Karen's going to go with Pesh to this event, and I thought, oh, that's okay. I never even put two and two together. Anyway, they've obviously had a long and happy relationship, and
Indeed,
still together.
Now, talking of supporters events, you've become quite well known at the Albion nowadays for helping out with the Former Players Association and also the Hawthorns Hub and the Albion Foundation. That's obviously something that you're quite interested in, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't have any involvement for about 10, 15 years with the football club. I moved when I finished. I finished with a bad injury, and I didn't want to. I sort of not turn my back on football. I just stayed away from it. And 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, the Ex-Players Association through Jeff got me involved with a couple of talks at walk-arounds before the games and Q&As before and after games, and from that a few things have happened. I've been on bike rides for the sponsored bike rides with the foundation, and been to various dinners, and and it was nice to be involved in the Memories Hub before Christmas, where groups of people meet up, and there was a couple of Alzheimer's groups which are involved with the hospital as well, where we just talk and discuss my career and the history of the Albion to help stimulate memories in the group. And it's a lovely environment. I've always felt very, very welcome, and it's I'm glad I've in a very, very small way, I might add, got back involved with the club.
Yep, marvellous stuff. Now, tell us about a bit teeth in about this bike ride.
Well, yeah, that was last year. They've done it a few years. I think Bob Taylor have done it. Brendan Batson has done it as well, where they pick a team. It was Huddersfield in my instance, and you drive up the day before, or 2 or 3 days before the game. Huddersfield are playing West Brom on the Saturday. You go up on the Wednesday, and you make your way back on a bike for over the 2 or 3 days, arriving at the ground for a walk of honour, and hopefully raise lots of money for the foundation, which we did. So there's another one going on this year. I think Blind Dave's asking me to get involved in something later in the year, which I've yet to commit to, but hopefully that will come off. So I can do cycling as long as there's no running. I can do cycling. And, there's no problem. It's enjoyable. Again, it's with supporters, and it's a lovely atmosphere, and it's what's not to like. A bit of exercise and raising money for the foundation.
Yeah. Now, sadly, we've only got a couple of minutes left. Now, some people always say, "Why don't you ask your guests what they're doing now?" So obviously, injury curtailed your career. And so what have you been doing since then?
I managed to play till 31, and then when I was injured, I did a sports qualification and I worked in Virgin gyms for a couple of years after that, and then I found myself in the furniture trade as a rep supplying furniture stores, and I've done that ever since 2003. So best part of 20 years now. I'm self-employed. I've got a small limited company that I supply furniture to the Midlands and surrounding areas. So stores like Cousins, Cooks, Lee Longlands. I supply them. I work. I'm the middleman. I'm an agent. That's what I am. I'm not a football agent. I'm a furniture agent.
Furniture agent. Coming out of the woodwork now. Yep.
So something completely different.
Excellent. Right. Now, there's loads more we could talk about. You'll have to come back on another programme in the future, I think, because we've only really scratched the surface, haven't we, on stuff that we've been doing. Yeah, really enjoyed that today, and you have as well, I think, Billy.
Yeah, great.
You
really
kept
interesting.
A bit quiet listening
really
in there.
Well, no, I guess it's just the talking.
Which is what it should always be about. Not much point of sitting there telling people about their careers, isn't it? Get them to talk about it, which of course is what Paul has excellently been doing today. Now, hopefully, Bob's going to be back with us for the next programme. So, can we all wish Bob
get well, Bob,
and hopefully be seeing you and listening to you on the next programme on the edition of the Throstle Club, which is available on Black Country Radio and Black Country Radio Extra from time to time. Also on my website, tntnews.co.uk, and you can get it on any good supplier of podcasts, such as Spotify and the likes, when you can download it and listen to the programme whenever you wish. So that's about it then from this edition of the programme. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll be back in the next month, which is really zooming by because it'll bring us round into February already, won't it? So absolutely amazing how quickly the year's going already. This is the Throstle Club with Norman Bartlam and Bob Downing.